Hi, this is Danny Byrd from Hospital Records, doing a computer music tutorial for you today. I'm just going to break down my track called Under the Sea, which is forthcoming on the Weapons of Massacration 3 compilation on Hospital in April. This track I started probably 2 years ago just as a little sketch, and first of all I started off with the intro, and it stayed as an intro kind of tune without any beats or bass, just a concept idea, and then I took it further and, well, actually I forgot about it, and then I sent it to someone and they said, no, that's wicked, you need to finish that off. So I'm just going to kind of break down all the parts that I've used in here. This is, I wouldn't advise this the best way to work. As you can see, I've got about 90 tracks worth here, and my New Year's resolution this year was to use less tracks, but it always seems to creep up and I seem to add more and more, so I don't advise it, but whatever you do to get the job done, and at the end of the day it's part of my sound, so I like to get quite intricate with parts of my tracks as well. So I'm going to break down the first bit of this track. The first bit of this track is started with an arpeggio type idea from a V station. I haven't got the actual MIDI file of this because I eventually bounced it to work on my MacBook because there's not an Intel version of the V station. Now we can have a look at this part I've called Mermaids. So this is where the track actually started from, the actual idea. If we take a listen to this. Now I started this just by playing in some chords basically. I found a wicked chord, and then I just took the second part, for example, and transposed it down 5 or 7, I can't remember which. So it was pretty simple, but it worked well. And then to add something to it, I just copied the same MIDI part to an Imposca chord, which again I've bounced because they don't have Intel versions of this yet. So, but you'll hear the same chord being played on the Imposca. So if we solo this, we can hear this now. So that worked quite well. That was just the same part copied and pasted, and that's always a good idea if you want to like thicken up a sound, because the arpeggio on its own sounded wicked, but I needed something to just thicken it up underneath. Also I've used the Logic Fuzzwire. You may have heard it filtering in there. The Logic Fuzzwire is probably my favourite plugin in Logic, and it seems to get lost in amongst of the other plugins, and this is my favorite little one, especially for like building stuff up, or just, it's a really nice filter to put on, and it really creates nice harmonics. So let's have another listen to that and look at that. I've automated it, the filter opening, obviously it's on a low pass filter on there as well. So pretty simple stuff. Another like bread and butter thing that I always do is I kind of have a high string over something. Again, just thickens it up. It's one of those sounds that you don't hear, but you kind of feel, and it just makes the whole thing sound a little bit more polished. So here I've got a high string from Logic's. It's a GarageBand instrument actually, just called Strings. It's a real basic thing, but it's good for your standard just high strings. I wouldn't try replicating an orchestra with it, but I've just got 2 notes high up, and I think I changed them to go with the melody. So as we have a listen to that, and we'll solo that. So quite boring to listen to on its own, but in conjunction with everything else, and when we mute it, it sort of loses something. So it's all sort of adding up to creating this big wall of sounds type thing. So I haven't even used any samples on this yet. This is all just come from my own playing and chords and sound creation. So you don't always have to start something with a sample. Again, bread and butter stuff as well. I've used like an explosion type noise on every 4 bars. And I've used a bit of Logic's tape delay plugin just to let that carry on a little bit better. So both these are like bread and butter stuff, and I've got a little reverse crashes here, which is the same thing reverse. So it just makes you feel like something's happening every 4 bars. It creates excitement in the track. And also, when I first did the first version of this track and played it out and gave it to the other hospital DJs, obviously it's kind of lends itself to being an opening tune for a DJ. But I didn't have any hi-hats or any kind of intro. It was literally just the arpeggiator, which made it a nightmare to mix, and it still is a nightmare to mix. But I've included some just simple hi-hats, so just a little bit of tape delay on those, but it just makes the whole thing a little bit easier to mix. Okay, so the intro carries along, and then it changes to a second section, and this is where I have the main riff, and this is the main idea of the track, I suppose, the main theme. So basically, to create, I've created a nice feeling to the end of the intro by just repeating the last chord of the Mermaid's arpeggio part. So if we have a listen to that.
Surface, this is rover 2. We're at 840 meters on the bottom.
And at the end of that, I've pitch bend down the strings as well. I think if we have a look at that. Yeah, you can see that I've just pitched down the last bit, so it's like it tells your ear, oh yeah, something's going to happen. The chord's been stuck for sort of like the last 20 seconds, and then the string kind of fades away and pitches down. So it's like, yep, definitely something else is going to happen after this. So let's look at the next section then. Okay, so obviously, what I was saying to you about the main theme, the main riff, I came up with on a ES2. I don't know why it says V station on here, because it's an ES2. Maybe I came up with it originally on a V station and then changed it to an ES2 patch. But this is just a really kind of simple two sawtooths, detuned type sounds, typical Euro synth. And these are the ideal for like lead lines. Let's have a listen to this soloed. So that's a real simple type synth lead. Let's have a look at that on the ES2. I think I made this one myself. I can't remember. I've called it crunk because it reminds me of some southern hip-hop type sounds. But you can find various sounds similar to that in the Euro synths part. And they're good for just like a cheesy little lead or something like that. And it's really kind of, if you've got a melody, it'll really come across strongly with one of these type sounds. I've also added a bit of tape delay on this, I believe. No, I'm lying. I've used I'm bussing it out to some delay on the bus channels. So it can be really good to kind of set up your effects to be on a bus, and then you can literally just change the levels here and send that amount, send the amount of the signal to the effects processors. That way you're not using up all your plugins on one channel. And I mean, I don't know whether it's such an problem now, but before, before the G5s and stuff, you didn't have so much computer power, and obviously stuff like reverbs or delays can use up quite a bit of power. So I've just got it set up so if I want a bit of delay or reverb, I literally just have to use the bus on the send, and this sends it to the delay or the reverb. Also as well, it's good because you're using the same reverb or delay on all the tracks. It sort of kind of gels it together a little bit more. Now the other thing underneath this synth is I've got an imposca line that I used as well for the kind of Reese type sound that rises. I've got to find that. I think that's down at the bottom here, which I've labelled Dirty Synth. So let's take a listen to that. Now I'm afraid I don't have the original synth on here again because it's from an imposca and that's Intel only. G Media need to make an imposca for the Intel, they definitely do. But literally it was a simple patch, and I don't think I even did much to it. I think it's just a simple patch that comes with it, and I've literally been playing a low note here, and it's on the glide setting, so I played a high note and it literally glides to it. That gives you that pitch bend effect. Now the first low down note is what creates the sinister feel of the track. It's quite important if you ever listen to it. So it gives you that sinister feel. If we mute that, we might not have such a feeling in that part now. So little things like this can really kind of create a sinister type atmosphere for you. And I've got various other little breaks underneath just to keep it interesting. Let's have a look. This pitched up little break I've got here, which I've high passed to take away all the bass and compressed it a little bit as well. So we just kind of like, gives you a nice little swooshing sound in the background. If we take it away again, it's definitely adding something to it. It's not a major part of the track, but it's nice in the background. So nice ear candy, as I call it. So all these little things kind of help the track along. And there's various other little bits of percussion, some bongos and stuff. I also used for the vocal parts, the spoken word. Let's check that out quickly. So this these little sound bites I just got from a Reason vocal refill, I think, and I don't use Reason for the actual program itself and write whole tracks on it, although I have wrote a few tracks like the Winchester Club and a few other tracks that didn't get released in Reason. But now I use Reason mainly as a virtual sound module for me, so it's really good just to be able to like rewire, get what you need and then bounce it down. So I almost use it as my virtual sound module. It's replacing my EMU Proteus that I used to use in the hardware days. So just yeah, this creates the vibe, nice little radio type vox. Now on the drop I've done a kind of typical thing with the kick and the snare, but it actually, you know, it required it. It didn't have the same impact if I muted it. And I've also included a little bit of the ride break as well. So I think now we'll have a look at the drums and break them down to their component parts. Just while I'm here on the build up, I've included some rise type noises. I always use like wind effects or a synth that I'll like pitch up 12 semitones just to create a natural rise for me. You can probably see that I'm using quite a few tracks to build up the breaks and to create that overall drum sound. Now for modern drum and bass you do actually need to use quite a few layers. I mean it depends what kind of style you're going for, but for what I'm doing I can't get away with just using a couple of breaks. Now it is a sort of you do have to be careful with it, because if you overdo it you end up with too many breaks and then it comes cluttered. If you don't use enough, it doesn't have enough power. So it's all about getting the right balance. So if we have a look at the kick drum first of all, which I've used in audio, let's have a listen to that. So if we look at the main snare, which I've used as a number of audio files. So if I double click on this, I've put them in a folder for ease of use. So if I double click, that will take me to the folder that I need. Here they all are at the bottom. Okay, so all the snares and drums I've put into a folder. And if I add that to the other kick, that creates my overall kick sound. Okay, so I'm using a number of snares to create up this track, that were like we saw with the two snares in that folder being triggered by the EXS. So both snares have different characters, but they work together well. So you really do have to layer up your kind of individual hits quite often. Now if you have a look at this these snares here, you can see I've got my my snare on the 2 and the 4. But I've got these little ghost snares in between here. Now what they do is make the beat feel a lot more rolling. Let's have a listen to that. Let's mute that, solo that. So you can hear it's not a powerful snare underneath, but what that does is it gives you just a more of a live feel, creates movement in the track. And if you have a listen to the snare that we're actually using for our ghost snare, it's quite a sort of little side sticks type snare. It's not something you'd use for the main snare. Now you can use the main snare for your ghost hits sometimes, but it's it depends whether it sounds too mechanical or not. So sometimes it's better to go for a little side stick type snare on this. So that covers the kick and snare parts on there, and then I've got a number of breaks that I've layered up. So if we solo these, and I'll bring in each individual break, and you can hear how it builds up. Notice how I'm using compression on these, some of these tracks as well, just to bring the volume up on them a little bit. I'm not too worried about retaining the dynamics on these. These are just little breaks. They're meant to be a layer in the background, and also I always high pass my breaks to obviously get rid of any bottom end that will clash with the kick or snare. So yeah, let's solo all these breaks, and you'll hear how they build up. Okay, so quite a few breaks I've used there, but they all work together well. Now my favourite part of this beat, and the thing that moves it along the most, is the ride cymbal break. Now this is here, I've called it ride it here. Now if we solo that and check that out quickly. This is a really nice break because it creates just that nice kind of layer over the whole top of the beat, and if you take it away you really lose something. Let's have a listen to the track and take that away. So you can hear there it's a really important part of the track. Now I've come up with that ride cymbal break. It didn't just happen for me, I had to kind of fiddle around with it. Now if we double click in here, you'll see the parts. I had to reprogram some of it, and some of it I've actually quantized as well. Some of the main hits on here, you can see in here I've left some of it as it was originally played, so you can see it's slightly off, but that's what gives it that rolling feel. So certain stuff like the snares there you want to quantize, but the bits in between the groove you leave unquantized because it gives a little bit more roll. Just depends. If it starts sounding messy, then obviously quantize it. So I've started with this break, I had to rearrange a few things on here. And then the most important thing on using a ride cymbal like this, where we're using it in the background and you want that constant shh type sound, you need to be using the compressor. So I've obviously compressed this quite a high ratio. So you can hear there where I'm actually kind of soloing soloing the ride break, and I'm bypassing the compressor. You can really hear when I take the compressor off that it's just the kick and snare of that break that are coming out, but when I'm using the compressor, all the bits between the kick and snare, the ride and the cymbal are coming up, so you're just creating this constant shh type sound. And then obviously I've high passed it as well, quite high. I don't want any of this break interfering with anything else, because it's just the top frequencies we want. So yeah, high pass that, we're getting rid of all that stuff. And I think I've used a bit of EQ on here, some minimal stuff, very minimal. So it sounded good out of the box, that thing really. All it needed was compression and a high passing as well, but it works well on the track. Right, let's look at the bass line then. So obviously we've covered some of the drums there. Oh, while I'm on the drums quickly, before we go on to the bass, I just want to say that a lot of the drums I've actually kind of bussed out, so they've got their own individual buses. So I've bussed all the loops into one bus, the snares into one bus. It just makes it a lot easier to deal with, because you saw there I've got probably about 5 or 6 different snares that I'm trying to manage. When it comes to the mix down, you want life as easy as possible for you, basically. So if you double click on that, just quickly, I'll show you the bus situation. So you can see on the main kind of snare on channel 16, I've used a bit of limiting to kind of just control the snare and bring it to one level. So if you have a look at the snare on there, it's actually not really, actually it's clipping a little bit, but it's not, I'm kind of taking away the dynamic range of it and creating it so it's one constant steady level. Okay, so yeah, let's leave that buses away. But hopefully you heard on some of these loops that I've consolidated here, the difference between bypass them as well. I'm only taking away like 300 hertz, 340 hertz, and taking everything below that. But you can hear the bottom end on that sort of stuff. If you can get rid of that kind of frequencies that you don't need, the kick and snare can come through much louder, and the whole thing's just a cleaner mix. So let's move on to the bass here. So I've used a simple kind of 808 bass sound on this. And when I say 808, that means it comes from the Roland TRA 808 kick drum, but it actually sounds good as a bass noise as well. It's the classic kind of drum and bass line. I've got a few plugins on there. I'm going to take these off and then add them so you can hear what's going on here. So it's really simple on this. It's literally, I'm using the Logic's Bit Crusher, and it's a real kind of cheap and cheerful way of getting distortion on here. So literally you just turn up the drive on here and it'll make things sound a lot dirtier. I think I've layered up exactly the same patch from the EXS onto another channel, and I've bit crushed it some more but high passed it so we get more of a nasty sound to it. Let's have a listen to that. Okay, another thing that I've used on here, I use a lot in my tracks, again, a bread and butter stuff, is I'll use a stab at the beginning of the track just to make it feel like something's happening at the start of every track. So on here I've used a little string hit, again, that I've used from Reason. So Reason is really useful for these kind of bread and butter sounds. This is from the Orchestra Soundbank. Again, subtle stuff, but it's your ear candy that keeps you going and keeps the track moving along. I'm going to move on to another section where it's obviously probably quite an integral part of my sound. That's vocals. Now I use lots of different vocal acapellas, and what I'll do is chop those up, and I'll use one phrase from one and one for another. I've got to find the part on this track quickly. Okay, so you can hear that that's obviously got some little vocals in there. Let's just have a listen to those solos. So quite often what I'll do is I'll bounce this whole track when I get to a certain point. If I need to put vocals in it, I'll bounce the track so I don't have to look at the whole range page, and then I'll take that 2-track bounce into another sequencer window and load up 11 or 12 different EXSs with acapellas in, and take certain words from certain acapellas and build it up like that. So I'm not using just one acapella for the whole track, and that way it creates a kind of quirky type feel to the whole thing, and I suppose that's the essence of like Todd Edwards type chopping as well. So you could probably hear there's some little chords and effects around that as well. So there's no real secret to that sort of stuff. It's just finding good sounds, having a good sample library and pitching those to the right pitch of the track, and just trying to fit them in any way you can. Again, it's kind of ear candy stuff. It's not your main melody, but it works well. Now on this section I've changed the 808 bass to go for just a straight sub bass. If we have a listen to this, this is being generated off an ES2 synth. Again, sometimes the simple stuff is the best. It's just a simple kind of sub patch, sine wave type patch that I've taken the cutoff down on, and again I've used a bit of bit crusher because that'll just give me that mid-range and make give me a harmonic to the bass and kind of make it sound a little bit more interesting. Now there's quite a few parts to this track, but I'll be here all day if I go into every single one of them. So I think I've covered the main parts of this track. Literally with my arrangements, if we have a look at that, I'll quite often start off with a intro or drop, and then I'll have the main section, which you can see here. Now it's important when you're working on your arranging to keep things equal. So if you've got 4 lots of 16 bars, so this is 16 bars, you've got 4 lots of that, that's fine, you can change it there, you can break it down there. If you've got 5 lots, it's an uneven number, so it seems quite weird. On here I've gone for 6 blocks of 16, if you see what I mean, so that makes it even and it makes sense to the ear. I've tried to do stuff where you'll drop it down there or here, for example, and the ear just doesn't like it. You'll hear back and something doesn't feel right on it. Quite often I'll have a second breakdown. Let's have a listen to the second breakdown on this part.
Oh, this is gorgeous. I feel like I'm out there.
Are you liking this?
I'm loving this.
So on that part I've taken the same intro, but I've taken away the arpeggio and just kept those imposca chords, and then added various bits of spoken word in here. And as the second breakdown builds up, I've got like a nice little lead line on top as well. If we have a listen to that.
The scale of these things is so much larger than I had imagined. Very few people get to see Mirror 2 from this angle.
Okay, so again I'm using just an ES1 for this simple type sound. I'm using some glide on there, so when it goes from this note to the next note, it's going to glide up and give us that nice P-funk sound. So if I solo that and we have a listen to that. Okay, so again, just a simple little thing, but ear candy, again, it creates the feel that the track's building up. So whenever I take away these parts, it always feels like something's missing, so it's definitely doing the right job here. And then I've got a second breakdown that builds up like the first in a similar fashion. But it goes straight into the riff this time, so it's a nice build up, and that one works. Sometimes if you can try and make your second drop heavier than the first, it can work well. And then as I'm working towards the outro, again remaining in even numbers, if you're trying to work out ways to kind of calm the track down and signal that it's coming to end, always a good idea is to kind of like take out parts. Maybe if you've got like a nasty distorted bass, just take it down to the subtype bass. Yeah, so I haven't used any of the distorted bass in here, so it all feels like it's nicely coming to an end. Now at the end, always to signal at the end of the track, I always like to have like a little crash or cymbal or explosions, and here's no different. Just creates a nice end to the track. I suppose it's attention to detail. Some people just, you'll listen to a lot of records and you can tell people just don't care, they've rolled it out, and it just kind of finishes with no reverb or anything. But it's always nice to take a bit of time and effort on your tracks. So that's my track, Under the Sea. I wish I could have gone into more detail with it, but I'm very unorganized with all my sounds, and I wouldn't be able to find what I wanted to show you, but I think I've broken down the main parts of it. A bit of advice is literally to always finish off your ideas, and you know, never discard them or throw them away, because this was an idea that I started where I just had the intro and it was kind of like a concept tune, but I didn't have the beats or the drop, and I tried to and it wasn't working, and I kind of gave up on it. But I sent it to someone, and it was sending it to someone that comes back and with feedback and gives you the momentum to like kind of finish it off. So always kind of, if you're stuck with a 16 bar loop, try and layer it out so it's kind of maybe 64 bars. So if you just got like this 16 bar loop, just copy and paste it 4 times and doing little edits, and you actually start hearing things into it. It's just that you're listening to that 16 bar loop over and over again. Anyway, that's enough from me. Okay, so look out for this track on Weapons of Mass Creation 3 on Hospital, which I've mixed a CD, as well as 3 other exclusive tracks from me on there. And that should be coming April time. So thanks for listening, and good luck with your productions.